Welcome to another installment of Friday Q&A. I hope you've all had a great week. As always, thank you so much for all the questions for this week. If you have questions for next week that you would like me to answer, ask me anything you like in the comment section below. And if you're feeling generous, like a lot of you have recently, and you want to support the channel, there are links to my music in the video description. You can pick up a Ragdoll CD or vinyl or something like this, a shirt. This actually glows in the dark, which is pretty awesome. So we have these on our Bandcamp, or you can follow the Teespring links. As always, I really appreciate it. All right, let's answer some questions. I'm going to do something a little different on this Q&A and try to organize the questions into categories. So we're going to start with gear because I always get questions about gear, probably because I spend a lot of time reviewing and demoing guitar gear. So let's get straight into that. Have I ever played a crank amplifier? This brings back some memories from the mid-2000s. I have tried a crank for about 5 minutes. I think they did kind of like a little tube micro stack or mini stack or something like that I tried in a guitar store once, and honestly I have no recollection of it, but I do remember watching somebody in a band who opened for us. I think we did a New Year's show up in Broome in Western Australia, and they were playing a crank amp and they made it sound pretty good. In fact, I would be quite curious to try and get my hands on one because I remember them having real mixed reviews, like people either really liked them or they kind of despised them. And as I understand it, there's kind of an interesting dramatic story behind the whole crank company. Not something I want to get into here, but if you've got any information you want to point me to or any sources, that would be interesting because they're kind of like one of the forgotten amps of the mid-2000s. Speaking of high gain amplifiers, I feel like this question's popping up every week, but I'm happy to answer it anyway. Will I get my hands on an SLO 30 to try? Hopefully. I would love to take one for a spin. I did a video with my Saldano Hot Rod 50 Plus during the week. If you haven't checked it out, just scroll back a few videos on my channel where I just played it and I didn't do anything. I'm gonna do a few more videos like that. So if there's amps that you would like me to demo in that format where I just basically, dial them in and play some riffs for 5 minutes and for once don't yabber on like I like to do, let me know in the comments. But the SLO 30, I've seen some demos for it on YouTube and it sounds pretty monstrous. I mean, my Hot Rod sounds incredible. It's the sort of amp you plug into and you just smile when you play it because it does what it does so very well. So hopefully I'll get my hands on an SLO 30, and when I do, you'll all know about it. Alrighty, speaking about gear, but not necessarily guitar gear, what camera am I using? At the moment, I'm using a Canon EOS M50. It is a portable mirrorless camera. Highly recommended, relatively affordable. It obviously looks fantastic, but I think more important than the camera is having good lighting. I've got a pair of soft boxes that I got off Amazon, and they light everything up really well. And light is information when it comes to cameras. So the more light you have, the better. Invest in good lighting before you go and invest in a camera. That's my advice anyway. But yeah, the Canon stuff, as always, is pretty good. And I like the little EOS because I can take it with me and do the vlog thing relatively easy. Speaking of some Fractal stuff, the preset I was using last week is actually a paid preset. If you go and check out Fremen's Axe-FX 3 presets, it is in one of his packs, so I don't kind of want to spill the beans on that one. If it was one of my presets, I would just share it for free and run you guys through it, but he's doing some really cool stuff with the synthesizer blocks there, and then I just dropped in my favorite kind of guitar amp, which is at the moment the Mark IV model in there. So it's basically his synth patch and then my lead thing on top of it, and it's a whole lot of fun to play. I absolutely love doing that. To round out this little section on gear, some of you saw that gig vlog that I did for the show that we played on Sunday, and there was a few questions about that. That particular show was the Fractal FM3 direct to front of house in mono. I have a mono and a stereo version of all my presets. It's nice having over 500 preset slots. So you can do that, and yeah, I ran the mono preset there because it was a mono PA. The guitar amps that you see in the background mic'd up aren't on, that's just the house backline. Indie Bar has a nice setup where you basically don't have to take any of your own gear if you don't want to. They have a drum kit, a bass amp, and 2 guitar amps as backline. But for me, FM3 straight in, and then we use in-ear monitors, but I have discovered that I really like having guitar and bass through the wedges at the front of the stage, just to move some air and just to get that kind of acoustic reinforcement of your instrument. And I know some people like to use in-ears and a guitar cab, or in-ears and something like the Atomic CLR. For that purpose, I talked about that in the video that I did with the CLR. And one last one with the NUX MG300. Can you get stereo out of it? You can. I used a little TRS to dual TS cable in my video and ran that to my interface because that one output doubles as the headphone output, so you can get stereo out of it. Alrighty, that's gear for this week. Now onto some more general topics. These are the kind of questions I really like to kind of get onto and chew the fat a little bit. So, advice for older or time-poor guitarists to basically get inspired more and play more. How can you kind of maximize the time that you have available? And I feel like a lot of the teaching I've been doing recently has related to this, whether it is, people in that older age category who have families and kids and jobs and they just simply don't have as much time as they used to, or whether it is, younger people who are, doing school or something like that. So they're having to cram guitar around all those kind of things. One really great piece of advice that I got that I started using that I tell everybody to do that seems to work is keep a journal or a diary of your practice. So if you had 30 minutes and you wanted to spend 15 minutes learning a Metallica song and another 15 minutes practicing sweep picking, you would write down in advance what you want to do. Today I want to spend 15 minutes practicing Metallica and then 15 minutes alternate picking. You have the book in front of you and then you do that 15 minutes of the song, 15 minutes of the practice, and at the end write yourself some notes like I found the bridge of the Metallica song really hard because it's all down picking, so next practice session I'm going to practice down picking, and some notes about whatever else you practice, so that way when you sit down and you go to practice, you look at what you did last time, you go, that's right, I need to practice my down picking. So what that is going to do is it is basically going to build continuity between practice sessions. It is really just going to help in general. So you're splitting up your time between learning songs and kind of practicing the mechanics, and then you're actually keeping track of what you're practicing. Or, if you're practicing with a metronome, track your top speed for every practice session with each exercise. So I just find that in a situation where you're time poor, you have to be organized. And that kind of works whether you're practicing guitar or rehearsing with a band or just doing anything in life in general. So yeah, and just focus on enjoyment as well. Not everything has to be a chore. Like, have a dedicated practice spot where you can have, in my case, I have my desk here in the studio with my monitors and my Axe effects and my favorite guitar, and I can sit down and get the tone that I want really, really quickly, so I don't have to spend a bunch of my practice time doing that. So yeah, there's a couple of little pieces of advice. I kind of hope that helps. Now, this is a great question. I've been I've been waiting to answer this one because it's come up. As a guitar player playing live, how can you engage more with the audience? Excellent question. This is really the sort of thing we should spend more time talking about, rather than should I be slanting my pick at 17.3 degrees or 18.3 degrees? That audience engagement live is what makes live music or live performance or live art great, because those experiences exist on that kind of one-to-one human level. They happen, they don't happen again. That's the magic of it. And what I find is whether you're playing to a really busy room or whether you're playing to a room with like 3 people in it, if you can find a person in the audience, I like to try to find someone at the back of the room so as to make it not as awkward for them, but sometimes, you got to just roll with what you can. Pick one person right at the back of the room and just focus on them and kind of lock eyes with them while you're performing, and make that person the person that you're going to convince with your performance. You're going to sit there, and if you're playing rhythm guitar, you're going to lock eyes with them, and you're really going to, you're going to give them some guitar faces, or you're going to really, really focus on them, and you're going to try to, I guess, just engage with them, because as human beings, we are very, very visually driven. Live music is great because it is loud and intense, but there is a whole visual aspect for it. So I like to find one person and kind of lock in with them, and I'll kind of move around and focus all of my attention on them and try to get them to move. Some people, are just, they won't move, they're statues, but sometimes you'll find that person who you can really kind of vibe with. Might be someone at the front of the stage headbanging, and you make that person your person for the gig. You're just going to solely focus on them, and you're going to lock in, and you're going to have a special experience with them for the show. That's one great tip that I find. And then, just in general, if you're enjoying yourself on stage, if you're up there kind of moving around, you got a big smile on your face, you might be pulling some guitar faces during the solo, you're kind of providing a template for the audience in that they can enjoy themselves without having to worry about being judged. If you go to a live show and you're in the audience and you want to dance around and like no one in the audience is doing it, but then no one in the band is doing it, you're kind of going to go into your shell. Whereas if no one in the audience is doing it, but the guitar player or the bass player on stage is just totally grooving and having a great time, that's going to make that one person or that 10 people or that 100 people in the audience who want to dance and have a good time and enjoy themselves just kind of open up to that experience a little bit. So there's two little tips. The iLock method, not the iLock that you need to run Pro Tools, but that kind of, just actual human engagement. If you want to engage with your audience are humans, so engage with them on that human level. Great question. Round out this little Q&A with a couple of what do I think about questions. And one question, what do I think about Freak Kitchen and Matthias L. Eklund? Apologies if I totally butchered that name. I'm Australian, I butcher every name, so I guess it doesn't matter. The Freak Kitchen stuff and the Freak Audio Lab stuff is amazing. One of my favorite music videos ever is the Freak Kitchen video for Freak of the Week. It has that Disney Atlantis animation style about it, and I love that. Great song. I first became aware of Matthias probably 15 years ago. I feel like there was a thing on him in Guitar Techniques magazine or something, and he is somebody we can all aspire to as not only guitar players, but musicians, because he just seems like a guy who is always learning. He's so enthusiastic about learning and teaching and playing. And, he plays this really bizarre music, but he plays it with soul, and it's so enjoyable, in my opinion, to listen to that and just listen to his kind of kooky take on rock and metal guitar. It's a beautiful thing. And then, all the free content he puts up on that Freak Audio Lab YouTube is just absolute gold. All his conical stuff, the rhythmic stuff, you should all go and subscribe to that, because even if you're not a metal fan, even if you're not a shredder or anything, you can learn a lot from that. And Freak Kitchen are a really cool band as well. Somebody, it was probably when we were on tour in Europe, someone came up to us and said, you guys kind of remind me of Freak Kitchen, and that's one of the nicest things anybody's ever said about me, so that's kind of cool. So that's what I reckon about Freak Kitchen. Good band, and Matthias is amazing. I'd love to buy him a beverage of his choice one day when we're able to do all that kind of stuff. All right, the next question in what do I reckon, or what do I think of, who's my favorite band of the big four thrash bands? I'm guessing you mean Metallica, Megadeth, Slayer, and Anthrax. Megadeth, hands down. Rust in Peace was the first thrash album I ever heard, and I remember putting on Holy Wars, and it changed my life. It was the heaviest thing I'd ever heard in my life up to that point, and it still is kind of like the standard for just great metal rhythm guitar playing and lead guitar playing. So yeah, strongly a Megadeth fan in that kind of camp. They're all great. I would actually probably say I prefer like Testament to any of the other bands. Testament kind of make up like the big five, throw Overkill, and then you got these peripheral bands like Sabotage in there who I really like as well. No diss on a band like Metallica, because they are just so important to metal being as big as it is nowadays. So just for my personal taste, I'm a Megadeth guy. And this question kind of ties in to the gear stuff at the beginning, and also the kind of middle philosophical questions, and also the what do you reckon. But this was a comment that popped up on one of the modeler reviews that I did over the last couple of weeks. And it's basically like, what's the point? Like, why why do I think it's a good idea to use a, hardware modeler when I've got real amps and I've got things like dual rectifiers and the stereotone molecular and the triaxis? Like, why bother emulating it when you've got the real thing? And there were a couple of other things in the comment or question as well, which were like, they don't sound like tube amps at high volume, blah, blah, blah. The usual kind of stuff. Not to be dismissive of that, but I often feel that people, when they're comparing a modeler, which is not only emulating the amp, but it's emulating the cabinet and the whole recording chain, and you run that through an FR and you put it next to a cab and it sounds different, of course it's going to sound different. They're different approaches, so that's apples and oranges right there. But in my experience with something like the Axe-Fx, it sounds incredible live. It sounds exactly like a mic'd up guitar amp. A lot of the time it's actually better because there's less noise. I've got more control over my gain staging and my effects. It's convenient because it's all in a really small little compact package, and it's consistent. That is such a massive, massive factor for me. When I dial in my live sounds and my live presets, I want a ragdoll show. I want the guitar sounds to be as consistent as possible. I want to deliver the best show possible to the people who have paid to come and see us. So that consistency where it sounds the same every single night. I'm giving the sound guy the same signal. A dodgy power supply isn't kind of going to cause sag in my amp. I'm not going to blow a tube. All of these kind of factors which are one of the reasons I love tube amplifiers. They're unpredictable. That's why I like them. It's kind of that, gives them that almost human thing that I was talking about with audience engagement. But at the same time, I'm kind of over that. I don't want to have to worry about showing up to a venue and the backline is an AC30 and then I have to play like drop C metal. I just want to take my FM3 or my Axe-Fx3 and I know I'm sorted. So that's a big factor. And then, not all modelers are created equal. Like, I totally understand that if somebody's experience is like with an old Red Bean pod, they're listening to me say all this and they're like, nah, dude, it doesn't sound like a tube amp mic'd up at all. But the Fractal stuff is just in another league. I would say that the Kemper sounds comparable to an amp as well. The Line 6 Helix, the atomic amplifier, I've heard incredible tones out of those things that, they are all valid ways to distort your electric guitar signal and provide it to an audience in a consistent fashion. So maybe that's just my perspective has changed. I kind of think about these things more like a sound designer or an audio engineer rather than a guitar player. I'm way more interested in the big picture of the band sounding good and the audience having a good time than just whether, my speaker is a Greenback or a Vintage 30 from 1993. Those kind of things really in the wash don't matter too much. So there's a very long-winded explanation of why I reckon it's a good idea to use a modeler. If you don't reckon that's a good idea, use whatever you want. There's no rules. Do what makes you happy. I'm doing what makes me happy, and I've actually never been happier with my guitar sounds or my live performances. So yeah, there's that. I hope I answered most of the questions that you guys asked this week. As always, if you would like me to answer a specific question, get it in the comments below. Pester me on here or on Instagram. You can find me Leon_Ragdoll. I post a lot of photos of my cats, so if you're into furry little creatures, you'll enjoy that. Until next time, stay safe, be good to one another, and play some guitar. It's the weekend. Party on.